Welcome to Still Growing in Grace, a program dedicated to inspiring joy, giving hope, and delighting in grace. I'm Mike Zenker, and I'll be sharing with you a message of hope that will expand your understanding of God's love and amazing grace. God already deeply loves you, totally accepts you, and really, really likes you. Growing in Grace Ministries Canada and Hope Fellowship, your community church, invite you to enjoy today's program as we dig deeper into what it means to be still growing in grace. Well, alrighty, good morning. Had a little oops there with my one fading over when I do these screen changes. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Still Growing in Grace. After all, none of us have really ever arrived. We're all still growing. Sandra, good morning from the UK. Thanks for those kind words. Being appreciated is nice, but so are you by interacting and watching, and yeah, it's really nice having folks actually watch and that are encouraged. So that's pretty cool. Well, today I've got a cool part 2 of last week. We had a conversation about how to grow deeper, or what does growing deeper look like in our walk, and it doesn't have to look all religious like. Andre and Mary-Anne Rabe had a great conversation. Part 2 is even better. I think you're going to love this. I shared this with my Hope Fellowship family at the end of August, beginning of September, but I didn't have a chance to show or share this with the Still Growing in Grace family. So I hope you enjoy this. It doesn't hurt to re-listen to some of this stuff, and I'll come back on after. I'm watching live with you, interacting with you in the comments, so let's dive right into this interview. I think you'll love it. All right, Andre and Mary-Anne, thank you again for joining me for part 2 of this. We're just going to continue the conversation because it was so good. I'm going to jump back to one thing that you said, Andre, about somebody told you to read, what's his name's book, Gerard?
Yeah.
Yes, and you wouldn't touch it for 6 months. Well, I'd be in trouble if I didn't mention a friend of mine who also told me to watch a video series. My friend and your friend, I think you stayed in his home, Rudy and Michelle Zacharias. Do you remember them?
Yay.
So, hi guys, there, they got the plug. But he gave me a video set to watch from Bruce Walkup from Australia. Do you remember who he is?
Yes.
Okay. Well, Rudy said, Mike, you got to watch this video. Yeah, whatever. Finally, I ended up watching it and just wept. It just hit. It's like, my soul wasn't ready for it, but God said, it's actually more ready than you think. So this is almost like us getting dragged into a greater truth of who God is. You began last time talking about the reconciliation being the message, not trying to do things, right? It's not the blood and all that stuff of the cross. This is about the empty tomb, the restored relationship for all humanity. That's what I'm hearing from you. And so last time we just ended up with the emptying kenosis. Do you want to keep expanding on that? Because I love that.
Yes, I would love to bring those two, because people might think, how do those two aspects of these two different courses that we running, how do they connect? Because the one has to do with narrative, and the other one has to do with losing your narrative. And and how can I say this?
And by the way, I'm going to say something else.
Yes,
you seem to be tapped into a mindset that the West is not. The Western church is locked into theological cubby holes that are clear, concise. Once the information's in them, they're locked and you can't change the content. That's what the Western church seems to be doing. And I see what you're expanding into is more mystical, more open, more spiritual by far. And am I hearing that correctly?
You know, words are, by their very definition, there's an ambiguity about them. There's an openness about them. The language is meant to be used to say things that has never been said before. Now, if we look at grammar, the rules of language, that might remain the same, and it's necessary so that we can speak in a way that makes us understandable to one another, because we've got that grammar. But each of us can can combine words, can combine sentences, can create meaning and say something that has never been said before. And I think God is more like the rules of grammar than what he is the author of the story. In other words, God makes your story possible, but he gives you the freedom to write it and author it yourself.
Wow. Even with sloppy handwriting. Huh.
Yes.
And he helps us through that. He's like with us in that, and always creating new possibilities of meaning. And so the way in which this silent meditation and the transformation of our narratives, the way in which they connect together is to first of all understand to what extent my narrative forms me and is me. And then secondly, to understand there's a part of me beyond narrative, beyond my story. You know, when Esau and Isaac, Esau and Jacob, you know, the brothers had a disagreement, and Jacob comes to Bethel. He lies his head down and he has this encounter with God. He wakes up, and in the Hebrew, well, our translation says, God is here and I did not know it. There's a beautiful Madristic tradition and way of interpreting that scripture that opens up new meaning. It says, God is in this I did not know. And so that is what the silent meditation is about. There's a part of you that's beyond words. And there's a part of God that's beyond words. And for us to find new meaning, because who wants to stay in that little cubbyholes of defined definitions? My goodness, how boring. We've been part of that, to just defend the same premises. Let's just live. We made for life. We made for possibilities. We made for creating new meaning. And the way in which silence does it is actually right in the beginning of Genesis. You know, in the beginning, when God created, actually, again, the Rashi, a Hebrew teacher, changes the translation so beautiful. And Robert Alter's translation of the Bible beautifully changes it. It says, when God began creating, the earth was welter and waste, or how the Hebrew is tohu v'bohu. It's this chaotic waste, just this chaotic spinning depth. And theologians have struggled with that, because we don't want a God who begins creating with chaos. We want a God of order on his own that just enforces his will and makes exactly what he wants.
Well, it's cleaner.
His design.
It's cleaner. You don't have to think, right? If you don't have to think, you don't have to be aware.
But here, right at the point of creation, what do we find? We find chaos. And we find the Spirit of God silently hovering. And calling from it new possibilities of meaning. Now, I come from when I was still 20 years ago, when I was in IT, information technology, the way in which you communicate information, just to give you a glimpse at why chaos is necessary for richer meaning. Let's take an example of two prisoners of war. They were taken as prisoners of war in a foreign country, and their wives await a message from them. And the first prisoner is given a greater variety of responses, a bit more chaos. He can say, all is well, I am sick, or I'm critically sick. He's got those three choices. The second prisoner is given only one choice. You can only say, I am well. Both of them write a letter to their wives, and they say, I am well. The wife who receives the letter that says, I'm well, and she knows that he had a choice to say, I'm sick or I'm critically ill, she's comforted because he had possibilities and he chose this one. The wife who receives the letter that just says, I'm well, but that's the only choice he had, is no better off than what she was before she received the letter, because that's the only choice. And unfortunately, as you say, that is what religion wants. A set of statements, this is truth, but that kind of religion actually teaches us nothing.
Wow.
God's creative process begins with chaos. It begins with options. It begins with possibilities. And the beautiful thing about it is he invites us to co-create the meaning of the story going forward.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the idea of how I connect.
I got you actually used a word just now I was wanting to ask you about, because the term co-creation or co-creators, again, in some circles, it's a weird phrase that I have a hard time listening to from some people because they're not believable. Can you expound on what that means without sounding weird?
We have children.
You be the judge of that.
We have children.
But you know what I mean, right?
And God allowed us to help in the creative process.
Yeah.
God did not create them by himself. He got us involved in that process. And I'm very thankful for it. So it's as simple as that. You do things every day that has consequences. And they've got creative consequences, sometimes good, sometimes bad. That is you acting. And so I use the term co-creation because I think in every moment, God supplies us with possibilities.
And dreams and ideas.
And God is the one. Yes, he's the one who draws us to the best and the beautiful. But we are the ones that have to agree to actualize those possibilities.
Participate, yeah.
It is in human flesh where it becomes flesh.
Could it be the same as a picture artist as they draw whatever comes to their mind or however they do it? That's a co-creation because there's still the thumbprint and the DNA of our loving Papa in that art. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Also genuine creativity, you know. Imagine if we also, I loved what you said earlier about the openness and, you know, I think with this as well, the fact that we are drawn to possibilities of, that we really, it really means something to God, that we matter to God. Our choices matter. Yeah. That we not, you know, God is not, there's not a hint of control in God. God doesn't desire to control the outcome of your life. He wants to draw you to the greatest meaning and beauty possible, but he's not the micromanager that we've almost, you know, kind of put onto God. We thought that God micromanages every moment and every bit, whereas the nature of love is to set free. Yes.
Well, don't we hear people say God is in control? You know, like I'm not sure he's a puppet master.
Exactly.
Not at all. Not at all.
And if he was in control to that extent, you look at some of the things or some of the plans and you think, well,
you didn't do a very good job.
We could have done it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So is it possible then that
the nature
Sorry, say that again.
Sorry, I just was commenting. Isn't it beautiful, the nature of love, and the
Yes.
freedom of love.
I think I just had something click in the we're co-creators. I think, tell me if this makes sense. In order for me to understand co-creation without any layers of judgment, as in, oh, that sounds weird. If I come from that as the more I'm realized I am loved fully, completely, and in a place of absolute delight, I can now see what co-creation can be. If I don't have that, and I think I have to contribute something out of duty, now it becomes a legalism, right? Then co-creation sounds weird, but it maybe doesn't sound weird when you understand love.
Exactly,
Yes.
because the very nature of love is uncontrolling. How can God be love and be in control? That's not love. Love creates freedom. Love becomes vulnerable. Love allows you to affect it as it affects you. Anyone who has been in a relationship of love knows that
it changes you.
It changes you. Love is not a one-way directional type of thing. Love is this communion that transforms everybody that's involved in it. And so God is vulnerable rather than in control. God, and maybe this is why I try to be sensitive with our terminology and all of that. But on the other hand, I know, having come out of that Christianese tradition, so many people just want something that works. We actually don't care about whether your terminology is maybe used by this group or that group, or it sounds a little bit new age or this, or who cares if it works and it is part of a conversation that enhances this intimacy and fellowship with our Abba. I will use whatever terminology is helpful in that way. And
I was thinking earlier as well of, I love fruit, because, the fruit, if you go past an apple tree, the fruit is evidence that the life in the tree is just too much for just the tree contain. It must flow. It must, give out. And you also don't walk past the apple tree and hear the tree going, oh, I need to produce an apple. It just happens. The life is there, and it's beautiful. And I think we were speaking earlier as well, Mike, about growing in this grace, and that this journey we're on is a journey that is organic and it's growing. It's not part of these, I've got my little boxes and they're all in the right order and they're all ticked off, and now I can just sit back and enjoy this grace. Because we now part of the in club that knows how love works and how freedom works and whatever. And but for me to grow in grace and to grow in this journey, surely then, if we are known by our fruits, that I should become more gracious.
Oh, really? That's got to be part of it?
And, I love the fact that that we can partake of this beautiful fruit, of this beautiful peace and this joy and this love can be part of our growing up in Christ. And
it's a growth that never stops.
No,
if something's organic, growing, then it's an inexhaustible experience. I think maybe, this is a part where I know a lot of the grace groups that we're involved in have struggled because they've come out of a place where religion was an effort to attain, an effort to get. The grace message was kind of a salvation in terms of you don't have to attain anything, it's been given, and there's great truth in that. But I think the perversion of that idea then develops into a life that is just static, a life where I have got no creative contribution to make towards my world because all I can do is discover what God has done. No,
there's
God
more.
is not is doing.
Yes.
God still
Doing through
does
you.
stuff through you. God still lives through you. There's still there's beautiful meaning and ideas to be invented and created that hasn't been invented and created yet. And we are invited to be part of this ongoing process of the Word becoming flesh, of the possibilities in the mind of God finding actuality in your life.
I think even for me, way back when I was growing in stages of grace and exposed to the same groups that you were, but this is embarrassing, but I came to a place of thinking I've arrived. This is it. I have found the message, and I can take on any pastor now because I've got the right answer. Oh, it was horrible. Only to find out, again, Rudy's video series from Bruce Walkup was part of the more exciting, greater and deeper, wider love of God expansion, the journey I'm on now that's never ending. But when I started to see and look back at even some of my grace friends accuse me of going too far, or I wasn't fitting their terminology anymore, therefore I was ostracized. So they created a new in-group. They took legalism and turned it into gracealism. It's like, what? So I've now, like we were just saying, growing in grace, my weekly program I do on Wednesdays is called Still Growing in Grace, because I've learned from all that, realizing, hang on, we're not done. We are all still growing, and we need each other, because you see something I can't. I may inspire something that you hadn't heard before, I don't know, or an attitude, something that reflects an emotion, who knows? But this is where we got to all be connected and recognize our connection. That's what I've seen.
And that relationship that keeps it alive and living. There's no problem with being content in the moment with what you have. There's much to be discovered, but it's the infinite possibilities, the God for whom all things are possible, who draws us forward into more relationship, more encounters, more meaning, more beauty, more consciousness.
What is something that you're seeing in the people you're discipling? What are the key areas of growth and awareness that are arriving to people? Like there's some topics. I deal with a lot of deconstruction topics because there's a big list. But what are you seeing in what you're sharing? Like in the first course and the second course, what are you hearing people are most excited about? Is there something tangible or a topic or a theme?
Yes. So maybe I'll take the first one. I think our first course will probably fall within this deconstruction, reconstruction category. But it is something that doesn't just help you reinterpret a few verses differently than what you did before. It is a whole new approach to scripture, to how we understand our relationship with others. I think that is one thing that I haven't touched on in mimetic theory, but it is the way in which desires are triangular. In other words, I don't just desire that phone. Desire doesn't just spontaneously occur between a human and the object of desire, but rather desire is mimetically transferred. So I see Mary-Anne desiring the phone, and that's why I desire it. You see it with toddlers. You have a room full of toys with one toddler playing with one toy. If you let another toddler in, the first thing he notices is the other toddler. The second thing he notices is the toy closest to the other toddler. And he runs for that toy. And grabs that, and war breaks out. A short summary of human history. I want what you want. And so that has been probably in the first course one of the most profound personal transformations that people experience, is they become aware of the relationships that affect their desire. and how they have scapegoated, whether it's their kids, their husbands, their friends, whoever, because of the internal turmoil of not knowing what they desire or having what they desire. And so when that becomes obvious, we've had beautiful testaments of my relationship with my daughter has changed, my relationship with my husband. And for me also, always the transformation of relationship, that's key.
Yeah.
So there's the one aspect, the conversation online might be academic, might be informational, might be exciting around ideas and concepts, but what comes out by the end of the course is relationship has been transformed. I've become aware of things within myself that I used to just project onto others.
Wow.
Then in the second course, what would you say is...
I think also that possibility of because we're meaning making machines. we are, and that transformation of meaning and in the whole aspect of God drawing us to participate, to co-create our world. That our involvement in the life of God being actualized in our world. And I think that's also an aspect. And obviously for many people who have not experienced being quiet and stilling their thoughts, that has, been such an amazing springboard into a marriage of not just information, but transformation and holding that space, creating space for new meaning and new possibilities to arise. And obviously also the community and the conversation is really, for many people transformational, because you would know in a journey where you're not just losing ideas, you feel like you're losing yourself
and control.
Because we are wrapped up in our ideas, and
to be on that journey with someone else.
People who are and just in a safe space conversation is always so important in that.
It sounds like you're talking about what Jesus, or what was mentioned in Philippians, where Jesus emptied himself. He modeled it. Something I had a program this morning, and something was said there that kind of caught me off guard, and the way you're talking, it reminds me of this. I've heard a lot of talk in again, some of these gray circles and some of the peripherals, that we are God, this whole idea of because I'm one with God, therefore now I am. And you hear the rhetoric going up, and it's driving me crazy. And then I realized what you just said about Philippians. Even Jesus did not see himself as equal at that time. This is his model of humility and emptying was the model for us. And that seems to be more of the fruit of what abiding should look like. Does that make sense?
I think it does. Do you want to say? that obviously we can partake of the divine nature, like Peter says, that there's a participation, that God is inviting us and enabling us to participate in who he is. And at the same time, God participates and becomes flesh and expresses himself through me.
Yes.
And so in a very real way, I can say, I am part of God.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And God is part of me.
Yes.
But if you speak about this body, this knowledge, this relational node, that is not all of God. God is everything.
Because if that was true, God's sitting beside you as well.
Yes, exactly. I can.
And also, for me, I think such a clarity for even that passage in Philippians 2 would be not clinging to the right. It's almost like these days we're very much about our right to be, I am the divine, and I am that is, you know, for Jesus, that was it wasn't even a how can I say, I'm losing the words here. Let's just say he didn't cling to that. He didn't cling to his
He didn't
right.
have to argue for it.
Yeah, for
just need to
equality
give
with
it.
God.
Yeah.
It was
He
never
wasn't
his attitude.
He wasn't no.
Yeah.
And it's only actually when you realize, when you're not coming from a sense of lack of being, but you realize all that you participate in, that you are able to empty yourself, that you are able to do exactly what he did, and that is reach out to the other. And I think in a sense that kind of brings to mind as well how we are part of one another. So, you know, even passage where Matthew, I think Matthew 22, where he speaks about love the Lord your God. They ask him, what is the greatest command? And he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, all your strength. And then he says, and love your neighbor as yourself. And we've often interpreted that as, okay, well, I need to just love myself well, and then I must love my neighbor as much as I love myself.
Wow.
But he says, love your neighbor as yourself. That
Oh
your
my, say that
neighbor
again
is
slower. That was beautiful.
that love your neighbor as yourself. That your neighbor is the next person you meet is an extension of you.
That sounds like fruit.
Yeah.
It does again. And then again, you know, we're not clinging to the right to know this, and now I'm right, you wrong, I'm in, you out. Rather, when you see the other as an extension of yourself, in the same way as you're an extension of God, you begin to see God in the other.
Yeah.
Oh
and
my,
you begin to reach out to the other. And yeah, it's one of those beautiful mysteries, isn't it? Where you know, even the passage in John 17 where he says, you and me and you and I, and thinking that doesn't even make sense. And it's part of the beautiful mystery of this relationship.
And Jesus came to reveal that mystery. Like it took me, I'm a pastor now for about 31 years this October. But for the last 20 years, is the only time I've known Christ lives in me. It wasn't until, here's the secret, Christ lives in you. That verse became a wake up reality check 20 years ago. And I've been pastoring for 10 years already. I did not know. I thought it was with me, but I didn't know it was in me, as me, with me, that I was fused in, like we're one in union. That was a bizarre concept. So instead of me trying to become, now I'm learning to discover my actual being, and that's a lot more restful.
Yes. Beautiful.
Wow. Well, thank you. I think our time's almost up. I got a couple minutes, so I'd love to hear what would you say to those that are hungry to, hey, I want some more of this. What could God be putting on your heart to share at this? Is there anything that's coming to mind? I know you shared a lot already. This has been beautiful.
I would invite you. We've got a lot of free resources available on YouTube. You can just search for Always Loved. Our website is alwaysloved.net, and from there you can find our articles, our videos, our school, all of those things. So we've got a lot of resources available. And actually what we want to refer you to ultimately, and what all of these teachings point to, is a source of living water that's within you. A source that will never run dry. A process that continually renews and brings new life. It's there. And so our conversation with one another is not because we have something you don't, but because we celebrate our common participation in the God who has poured himself out
and
to
is
us.
always way larger than we and way better than we've ever imagined.
Yes.
Deep draws to
Thank
deep,
you
right?
so much, Mike,
Yes.
for thank you for your time as well. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
Oh, this is fun. I hope we can do this again. I have, I'll talk to you about something when we're done. But this has been a wonderful thing. I'm going to make sure the links are on in the notes below once this airs. But I think this is just scratching the surface. Like I remember a conversation with William Paul Young, and he was sharing on stage of how the Trinity submitted to humanity in full submission. I've never heard that concept before, but this is where the whole vulnerability of God was exposed. I'd never seen it before. It's like, what? Wait a minute. So if that's how God submitted to the world, that's a model for us. Instead of the world that we're in right now, especially pandemic time, everybody's about rights, my rights to this, my right to that. Wait a minute, you got no rights. You gave them up. So I don't know. There's just something that doesn't click.
Yeah.
Yikes. All right. Well, thank you, Andre and Mary-Anne. This was a pleasure. And I hope we can chat again sometime.
Love chatting to you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Bye-bye.
All righty. I hope you enjoyed that. Oh, my goodness. That was so neat to hear that again. I forgot parts of it, for sure. And it's very engaging. It definitely will create hunger. Actually, Jesus creates the hunger in us, but some of these things trigger that he's wanting us to see a wider and better perspective of others. I think it was Joy who said, it's not us and them, but us. Oneness is in our union with God. And that's it. Like, if we're not to see each other as separated. I think separation is part of the big lie, that God is separate from us, that we're separate from each other. Oh my goodness, it's wild. So hello to a few of you. I'm going to say, Joy, good morning, Joy. And Mark, I'm assuming you're both together. Bill down in Georgia. Woohoo. Hope you're doing well, buddy. And then Helen, looks like you're already part of the I don't even know how to say it now. I'm getting all tongue-tied. From the Academy with Andre and Mary-Anne. Thanks for tuning in and listening today. Okay, that's it for today. It's time for me to run. Hope you guys have a great week. Next week, we are going to have a great topic. It's going to be with Bill Thrasher and Richard Murray. We're going to talk about Ananias and Sapphira. We have 2 episodes on that I think you're going to like. It's deeper and wider than you thought. I'm ready for it. Are you? All right. Thanks again, everyone. You guys have a really great week, and we will catch you next Wednesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Join me next time on Still Growing in Grace for more good news. Enjoy previous episodes by downloading our podcast at growingingrace.ca. You can also visit hopefellowshipycc.com to find our service times and location. If this show has been an encouragement to you, please consider making a donation today at growingingrace.ca and help us keep spreading this good news. Thank you again for tuning in to Still Growing in Grace.